Let's get cooking. Look at that yummy steak. Welcome back to episode 3 of the Science of Taste series. I'm your host, Chef Meg, Executive Director of the local nonprofit, the Academy of Edible Sciences and Ethno-gastronomy. Feel free to check us out, our Instagram page. That's AESE, AESE _of_SD, so for San Diego. And feel free to look at our different food photos, our videos that are on there, all of our test kitchen, and additional programming that's found through there of our food education courses. Today, for our 3rd episode, we're going to be not taste testing, sorry, maybe a little bit of the steak later, but we're going to be looking at heat. Heat versus temperature. Are they the same thing or are they different? In order to go through this process of looking at these different scientific terms, we're going to head over to our whiteboard here. So, heat versus temperature. Well, they can't be the same thing or else we wouldn't have different names for them. Heat is what we use in the kitchen to be able to transform something like a steak from its raw form to something super yummy and tasty with that fat rendering down in the pan. So heat itself is simply energy. It's energy that's being released and transforming proteins, carbohydrates in our foods. Versus temperature. So temperature itself, we think of numbers, right? A numerical value. So it's essentially a system of measurement, a way of quantifying how much energy is being released and what transformations are happening. So temperature and the number, whether we're looking at Celsius or Fahrenheit, depending on where you live in the world, when we look into that, there's a few factors that it's dependent on. So the first is the total amount of energy that's in the system itself. We have density, which is looking into how many molecules something has contained within it. As an example, I drew up both an empty glass that's just filled with air and a glass that's filled with water. So out of these two systems, we're looking at a glass of water that's going to have a lot of water molecules in there, which is actually a higher density than this glass and the amount of air molecules that are within it. So if we look at the difference between something that has higher density and something that has lower, there's more energy contained within a higher density object. And that's because essentially that energy is just movement of the molecules. So if we have more molecules moving around, then we have more energy that can be released in that system. The third dependence on the temperature and that numerical value is also on something called specific heat capacity. And specific heat capacity, when we're talking about cooking, is the different metals and the different products that we use and how quickly or slow it'll come up to temperature. So some of these pans, like this one maybe, the Teflon one for example, is going to take it's relatively thin, but still some conduct heat a lot better. So for our stainless steel pan, that's going to conduct heat really well. Most of our pans that are used in commercial kitchens are stainless steel, but I really love to cook with cast iron as well. You just always get an excellent sear every time, but it conducts heat very well. Another that has a great heat capacity is copper, which is very expensive, so you won't see them in the average person's kitchen perhaps, but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful metal and it conducts heat super well. So that's a great one. If you're looking for new pans, maybe consider copper or even a bottom copper. And then, so cooking itself, when we're in here in our test kitchen and trying everything, cooking is just then the transfer of that heat energy. So we're taking something like a raw steak and transforming it into something more delicious, but through that transference of heat energy. Now, different types of this energy and how we can transfer it. The first we have here is called conduction. And some of you have probably heard of conduction, or maybe you've heard of a convection oven, but conduction itself is when we have direct contact of heat that's being transferred. So think of that steak that I was searing earlier, setting it into the pan and searing it. We have direct contact of that protein and those fats onto the pan that's getting the heat energy from our flame. We have convection, and convection is just a different way that heat can transfer to something. And in this case, it's through the mass motion of molecules moving around. So think of an oven and all of those air molecules as we're heating them up, which, yes, there's going to be a flame underneath, but really we're controlling that heat, and with a fan that's in an oven, those molecules are rotating around more evenly so we can evenly cook something. So that's a convection way of transferring heat energy. Then we have radiation. Radiation, I think straight to a fire. So whether it's a s'more that you're cooking, for example, that radiant heat energy, that electromagnetic radiation that's being released off of that fire itself is going to transform our marshmallow from being, you know, kind of squishy to nice and crunchy and ready for that s'more. And our last one that we have here is latent heat. So this type of energy is being released when we have a phase change. So think of steam, a pot of water boiling and that steam that's being released. Maybe we want to steam some vegetables for our dinner tonight. That's going to happen through that latent heat. All right, let's look at some of these science topics applied today. We're not going to be doing any taste testing, but we're going to do a really fun human experiment with a willing participant. And for this experiment, we're studying temperature versus energy in action. So does the medium, this is our question, does the medium in which heat is transferred influence the temperature range one human hand can withstand? So in order to do this, I need my willing participant. So I have back my lovely assistant here, Chef Alex, to help illustrate these concepts. All right, so Alex, are we ready?
Sure.
And are we willing?
We are willing.
Okay, that's why you're here, right? Okay, so we're not gonna taste this wonderful looking steak here. Instead, I'm gonna have you use your hand to test your ability to withstand heat.
Okay.
So the first one that we wanna do is having you set your hand inside of the oven, but not touch anything because we don't want you to burn yourself. And hold it there for as long as possible. And then you tell me when you're like, okay, that's enough. It's getting too hot, because I'm going to time you. Then the second one, we're going to compare that value, which we have our oven set to slightly higher than 200 degrees. And our second test is going to be with your hand then placed in water. And it's cold for now, but we're going to turn on the flame and then bring that up to temperature until you say, okay, that's getting too hot. We're going to test what is that temperature.
Okay.
And see, is it a similar range? Is it around 200 degrees? Or is it higher? Is it lower?
Okay.
And we'll see how long it took you for that as well.
Okay,
and then we
great.
can discuss your results. Okay, let's start with the oven. And start. How's it feeling there?
It's hot.
Nice and toasty?
Oh yeah. I feel like I'm getting a tan.
You're at 46 seconds.
All right. I'm gonna pull it out.
It's feeling about that point. Okay, so let's say you were at 51 seconds for the oven test. All right, okay, so this is cold. This pot of water is cold. So we're not starting hot, but you wanna make sure that when you put your hand in, you don't touch any side of the pot, because that's what's actually taking on the heat, the flame, okay? So we'll start our timer. Do you feel it on your arm, or are you okay? And you let me know when it's time, and I'm gonna take the temperature of the water.
It's getting hot.
Is it like a bath hot, or is it like...
It's past that hot.
Oh, okay, we're past a bath hot.
And yep, pulling it out.
Okay, taking the temperature. Turn off our heat. Okay. All right, do you want to know your results?
Yeah.
All right, Alex, for your results. For the oven, it took you 51 seconds before you said, okay, this is too much, and I gotta pull my hand out, and the oven was set at 200 degrees Fahrenheit, And then we also had you test your hand in the pot of cold to hot water as we raised the temperature on you. And for that one, let's see, how long did it take you? I think you were at 1 minute and 53 seconds. So it took a little bit more time before you reached there, though it started off cold, right?
Yes.
So that plays a factor, of course. And the temperature for you, can you guess? Do you think that it was lower or higher?
I guess lower?
Lower, maybe? Okay, well, let's talk real quick again about something called density that has an impact on the temperature. So if there are more molecules in, say, a cup of water rather than a cup of air, then we have more molecules moving around that can generate more energy. Think of it this way. For example, maybe in the Northeast, it's a nice spring day and it's 60 degrees out and you're like, okay, I think I'm ready to put on some shorts today and hang out in the sun.
Sure.
Which to some people might be a little bit cold, but think of the difference in, I'm gonna jump into this lake today that's at 60 degrees temperature.
Yeah, no thanks.
Yeah, no thanks, right? So there's a difference there, and that's because of, we're talking about with density and the number of molecules that plays a factor there. So heat versus temperature, the temperature again is just that system of measurement, and the heat is our means in which that energy is being released and transferred. So thank you for being our willing participant to illustrate the point. And I guess we can now cut into the steak if you want to share it.
Ooh, yes.
And we'll see you next week for another experiment in our test kitchen here with the Academy of Edible Sciences and Ethno-gastronomy in North County, San Diego. Again, I'm Chef Meg. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
I don't know why I put it on diagonal.
Oh no, it's okay. I think it's ribeye, so it's got that high fat content. It's so tasty.